So how many in the audience have heard of applied intuition and know what applied intuition does?
Okay, that's like 3? No, that's about a half the audience.
3%.
Yeah.
No, so maybe we'll start there. But first, this room is actually very special. You won't remember this.
I do remember it.
You and I first met in this room.
Yes. For the folks who don't know, this is where YC Demo Day happens. I used to run YC. I was the COO there and did many things, include run Demo Day. Demo Day happened, I think I did 7 demo days on the stage. And the funny thing is, and this is only for the founders who, they will remember this, who were in those batches. This was the Sam Altman era. He was the president, I was the COO. And I would stand at that door near that pole, and the founders, they're raising money. There's a room full of investors, and it's really a packed room, usually 600 people, standing room only, and they got a pitch for 2 minutes. And the founders would be quite nervous. This is the culmination of their YC experience. And I would whisper in their ears right before they go on stage, don't worry, it's not like millions of dollars are riding on the next couple of minutes. And they're like, why would you say that? I was like, you're on stage, let's go. So, but it was good because it would distract the founders, and that like shock and awe would get them right back into like, okay, I gotta pitch whatever this guy is saying. I gotta block out, and they would actually block out the audience. But yeah, I've seen hundreds and hundreds of pitches on the stage. I saw the DoorDash pitch, the Twitch pitch, the GitLab pitch, Checker, Flexport. I mean, you name it. I've seen it here. I saw the first versions, and obviously helped assemble a bunch of the pitches as well.
Yeah, no, unique vantage point, and this room is very special for that reason. Are
there founders in the room? Are there people who are starting companies, or is this all engineers? Can we get a couple of? Don't be shy. Don't be embarrassed.
Future founders. Future founders.
The ones who look the most tired are the ones that raise their hands reluctantly.
No, it's you're not being judged. So let's start there. Applied intuition, right? Let's talk a little bit about what applied intuition is. It's a big company now, but it started off like any other small company.
Yeah.
And maybe talk a little bit about, I want you to talk a little bit about what applied intuition does today. Because a lot of people here don't know, but generally also don't know the breadth and depth of the technology that's developed at Applied Intuition. And then we'll talk a little bit about where the world is headed.
Yeah, absolutely. So in my quick background, I started my career as an automotive engineer. I went to the General Motors Institute. Actually, what the Mercedes guys were showing, that was like my life for many years. I literally worked in the body shop. I literally worked in assembly, and where the VIN numbers attached to the car, I was literally responsible for that area of the body shop. So I know that area well. That's 20 years ago. And I worked at Bosch, big tier 1 supplier, maybe the most competent and large automotive supplier in the world. And then about 20 years ago, I moved over to software. I was a mechie undergrad, but I did most of my work in electronics once I graduated. But I really left that whole universe and joined the software universe in the way that we know it here in the Bay Area, which is, that era was like the Ruby on Rails kind of web app era, for any of those who remember. And then built a couple of companies. One went through YC. Company was acquired by Google. I was at Google for a number of years. I worked for Jen Fitzpatrick, for any Googlers who are in here. I think she's the most tenured Googler now. And then was going to do a robotaxi company with my current co-founder, Peter, and Paul Graham of YC said, he knew I was married, and I am married also. My wife would be very annoyed if I said was and am. But my wife was pregnant with our son, and Paul Graham said, oh, you don't want to start a company and a family at the same time. And that's how I ended up at YC. But Bilal and I met, and I met a lot of investors, funded a lot of companies. But in my time at YC, we funded Cruise, and that was acquired by General Motors. And that got me and Peter Ludwig, my co-founder, to think, okay, what's happening in the car business? And the core idea that we started Applied Intuition, and the company is different today, almost 10 years later, but was that the car business is going to be a software business in some way. And we ultimately want to deploy software onto vehicles, but OEMs are not going to let a little company do that for all the safety critical reasons that exist. And so we kind of worked backwards, and we started originally, and it's still a huge part of our business, as essentially a developer tools. So simulators, data engines, things like this that we'd use to build autonomy and ultimately build and deploy all types of software on cars. So today, I think on our website, we say 18 of the top 20 automakers globally use our products. It's It's all 20. Just I think 2 of them don't allow us to talk about them publicly. And then from there, in the last 10 years, Applied then got into things like the vehicle operating system, which is kind of like abstracting the hardware away from the software. And then, of course, the thing we're kind of more and more known as autonomy. We do autonomy both for cars, we do it for trucks. We're running driverless trucks right now in Japan, L4. We do it in mines. We're running dirt movers in mines right now. We do it for ag, we do it for defense, and I'm missing one, construction. And so it's just like any physical vehicle, we try to make it intelligent. And you can make it intelligent in a couple of ways. And every time you meet a manufacturer of those vehicles, they have a different spectrum of what they want to build versus what they just want to buy. And typically the companies that are more aggressive and just want to get a good product as the market, they'll buy more because it's just done. And the ones and then there's a bunch that will also just want to build. But we're involved in basically every major program globally in terms of autonomy. We're providing some sort of tools. We're providing maybe more than that. Maybe we're providing models. We're providing, and the self-driving industry is as interesting as it's ever been. And we've taken a different path in that, as you know. Yeah.
So,
and I think our claim to fame as a company is we've raised on primary about $1 billion, but we've never spent any money ever to build a company. So the company, for the people who don't know today, is a $15 billion company, still private. We're based here, not too far from here in Sunnyvale. We just moved from our Mountain View office. Series F, 1,000 engineers.
How many people work there now?
1,000 engineers.
And these are engineers.
Yeah, the company gets annoyed when I say that because they're like, do the non-engineers not count? So the company totally is 1,400 people.
Oh, God.
But the 1,000 engineers is the important thing because it's number one, it's just a massive engineers. So that's a huge number. And everybody knows Bay Area engineers are not like, are both sophisticated and expensive. So we have a real massive engineering talent, obviously all focused on software in our domains.
And quickly, I have to ask this. You're very in-office, culture person. Where are these engineers coming from right now? They're straight out of school? Are they like quitting Tesla to join you? Are they coming,
all of those things. We have Mercedes alums as well. We recruit very frankly from all the obvious places. The most obvious, the biggest alumni groups for us are Google. Peter and I worked at Google, and it's a Mountain View company, and that's kind of obvious, I should say. But then Tesla, Nvidia are the 2 next big alumni groups. I think we're the largest ex-Waymo shop in the business. We're the largest FSD shop, I know, ex-FSD shop in the business. So we tend to be the first call. And in terms of being in office, I mean, we thought a lot, and there are not many founders in the audience. I won't go too far into this, but building a company in Sunnyvale or Mountain View versus building in San Francisco, and it's not only because my YC and Mountain View background, this is a better place to build a company. South Bay is a better place to build a company than SF, mainly because it's less distracting. It's like why SF is better to build than New York. New York is actually fun. It's that's why it's not good to live in New York. I mean, it's like if you're hungry, you shouldn't go shopping because you're gonna buy all the groceries. These are very kind of in and out kind of things, cause and effect. So there is some truth in Sunnyvale, downtown. I call Sunnyvale the Manhattan of South Bay. Because Sunnyvale is extremely boring. The AMC is the highlight of the social calendar. It's I'm gonna get Chipotle and go watch a movie. It's whoa, big night. So that's, but that's his intention, right? That is the intention. Even Boston, I mean, we lived in Boston for a lot of years. Boston's a fantastic city. And when Sunnyvale gets Sunnyvale gets really cool, we're moving to Milpitas, Keep running further and further south.
That is so funny. But, that evokes a very, pertinent question, which is, in some ways, Tesla has an FSD. We actually, VP of AI, Ashok was on stage.
Yeah.
You can take Waymos anywhere. My daughters can take, it's regularly available. People still talk about, hey, these are complex technical problems that are not all solved yet. Right? People are building companies now, Gaussian splats and robot foundation models and eval systems for those models. What is the state of the technology?
We do all those things, by the way. The specific thing I would say is, yes, the Waymo product works very well, but there isn't a business model that's completely shaken out. It will happen, but it's not there yet. especially when you take into account that $15 to $20 billion conservative has been put into developing that technology. On the Tesla side, the business model is figured out, which is very impressive. Consumers buy vehicles and then they pay for this thing, and they just in the last couple of days have come out with how many people are paying for FSD, and they're very big numbers. So those are two fundamentally different things. But we're different in the sense that, number one, we supply this technology to lots of manufacturers, but automotive is only a slice of that, right? It's, let's say, a third of the business. So like 60, 70% of our business is all these other verticals. And the trick that we're doing is it's kind of like if you look at like the Bosches of the world, the companies in many ways that are our own ancestors. The way the Bosch works, or the way the Valeo works, or Conti, or ZF, or Aptiv, or who are Denso, is they're allocating those costs across a bunch of manufacturers. And they take all this, like, let's say, brakes capacity, and they make brakes in one factory that's shipped to the whole world. We're kind of doing, so they basically take that fixed cost and they're distributing. We're doing the same thing, except instead of making brakes, we're making models and developer tools and operating systems. But the business model is very, very similar. And I think in that way, we're a bit more isolated from the trials and tribulations of figuring out technology and figuring out business models. With that said, the self-driving technology specifically has changed a lot in the last 24 months, or last, let's say, 36 months, where certainly pre-transformers, and certainly, let's say 10 years ago when we were starting the company, and it was kind of the Waymo game, and then Zoox a little bit, and Cruise and a couple of other folks. The way self-driving was built was very, very different. Waymo alone has kind of rebuilt that stack many, many times. And so I think we also were very fortunate in the sense of we really entered the ecosystem post this technology transition. And today, that kind of like end-to-end, generalized model, which is kind of the default everybody talks about, and from Nvidia to some small startups to us, that wasn't the case 5 years ago. So every company who worked on this spent hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, most of them who don't exist, actually paid for the ecosystem to learn. And we're the types of companies that learn because we hire those engineers and then they bring all of their knowledge and experience into our company. So I think, again, for founders, like timing of the market is really important. So it's like this multivariate problem where it's not only the technology you got to figure out, it's not only the business model you got to figure out, you also figure out when you enter the space and when you enter the battle.
Yeah, this is an important point, because the question I have for you is, this is a general audience. They're working in machine learning and AI in various fields. These are guys, would work at OpenAI or Anthropic or whatever.
And that's relevant to the AI ecosystem today broadly. Like this concept of the technology matters, the business matters, and just the timing matters. And so as you figure out, like, what company should I join or what thing should I start, you have to really ask all of those questions. It's not enough that it's like well regarded on Hacker News that like this thing is interesting and novel. Novelty the market doesn't care about, right? It just doesn't.
Well, and what about, so related to that would be, these days it's less about Hacker News, it's more like who's raised $500 million, $1 billion Series A, who's like researcher leaving, it's like almost like stars going from one company to another.
Yeah, 500. But anytime you see a $500 million, $300 million, you know who that screws? Employees. Because the entry price for all early employees now is at like $1 billion or $2 billion. And unlike investors, as an employee, you don't get to make 5 bets or 8 bets. And you don't just go out to your LPs and raise another couple $100 million, then you distribute it to another Neo lab, which is pricing itself at ridiculous prices. To be very, very clear, why those prices are ridiculous is when these, where's truth? Like most fundamental question, how do you price a stock? Well, that gets priced in public markets because there's no collusion. When you have private companies, there is very real collusion from private investors who are playing the greater fool's theory, which is you will write the seed, I'll write the A, somebody else write the B, and then you'll get the markup on your fund. You go to your LPs and say, look at this huge markup I have, you can raise money. I'll get the markup on the A, I'll go to my LPs and say, look at this markup. None of these are all unrealized gains, but in that process over 6 or 8 or 10 years, you can maybe now manage $2 billion. I can maybe, as an A investor, could manage maybe $30 billion or $20 billion or $10 billion, and I'm making real fees from that. You can just do the math. 2% of a $20 billion AUM is
nice.
never work again money, and you don't have to get any return. So that's the hustle that's happening in the private markets. In the public markets, there isn't a hustle because there's no collusion. Your stock goes up, and the public investors do a very simple formula. They look at your next 10 years of earnings, and they discount that back based on the interest rate, and there's a certain amount of value. And then they're like, how much are you going to pay for this cash flow that's going to come in the future? That's why you see all this compression of prices when companies go public, because suddenly the dream is no longer a dream. It's just about cash flows. The exception being there are companies that have broken out of that. They're disconnected from cash flow. So that's the pejoratively people call meme stocks, or they're just called stocks that retail investors really like. We all know who those are. And there's some value and there's some truth in that is let's say an illegitimate valuation, but there's some truth that it's a legitimate valuation because those companies are doing exceptional things and the market is willing to put everything to the side. But the macro point being is, if you're an employee, all that doesn't work in your favor. You join a company that's worth $1 billion or $2 billion and doesn't have a product, or more importantly, doesn't have revenue, let alone cash flows, you're the one who's going to pay for it.
Yeah.
They're taking it out of you. Because what you should really be coming at an entry price is at a $20 million price or $30 million price. So when the company goes from being worth $50 million or $10 million to $200 million or $1 billion, you get 10x your equity, or you get 20x your equity. And that's how Silicon Valley works. But if your entry price is at $2 billion, it might be really easy to tell your friends and other people that you went to, school with.
You might get a date, but you might not make money.
Yeah, exactly. It's just exciting to write on LinkedIn, my company raised $500 million. You should never be proud of selling stock. That is hard-earned equity. You want to hold on to it. But that's not how our simple monkey brains work.
So this is why Combinator, Qasar Younis, who just went on a rant, I would say it is also okay to join a company that's $15 billion worth if they're doing revenues and profitable.
Yeah. I mean, we play a different game fundamentally. Yeah. We play a different game. We play a game that it's very important to make revenues and it's important to make cash flows because that is the truth. And Applied has, luckily we've been able to do that, knock on wood.
Yeah. No. I mean, look, your passion, it's just both as a friend and having known you for such a long time, you have a real passion for what Silicon Valley accomplishes. Silicon Valley has this culture of building and growing and being engineer friendly and technology friendly. Before I even moved here, I knew about how Google, right? Engineers are valued a lot. If you're a business guy at Google, it was the same way. 400 people at Applied Intuition didn't get mentioned until, as a side note, 2 of them are standing in that corner and we love you. But
marketing is valuable.
we love you. Talk a little bit quickly about, there's so many different applications in physical AI, automotive, construction, manufacturing, industrials, defense, energy. I started a fund focused entirely on that now. Talk a little bit about defense, national security, because that's become really important, especially under this administration. You do a bunch of work in that. Are you seeing real businesses being built there, or is that all also just noise?
No, I think real businesses are being, by the way, in every one of these verticals, I think you have real businesses being built. The key is, it's like anytime there is a boom, people will make money, but not everybody will make money. And so some technology will get adopted, but not all technologies will get adopted. So that's kind of the way the framework. In terms of defense specific, there's a similar thing. I think the couple of things in defense that are unique that don't exist in the other verticals is defense is basically an American business. The American defense ecosystem is much larger, than the next, let's say, 10 countries combined. So you're really selling to the Department of War and then the relevant branches. So that's number one. Number two, there's some proclivities of selling to the government, whether it's export restrictions and ITAR, whether it's who owns IP when things get really big and the government contracts are huge, because there's a certain covenant that the government has, which is they're using taxpayer dollars. So they're giving you a lot of that money. The government kind of wants a bunch of that IP. The way the government buys is also different. They tend to be hardware focused. They tend to buy boxes. They buy guns and planes and tanks. So, selling them eval tools, which we do, becomes a more complex sale because now you're also doing the education. You go to a GM or Mercedes or somebody, they already understand what they're buying, by and large. The government doesn't, they want kind of end-to-end products. So you as a founder or a company playing in the ecosystem, you have to know those things. They're easy to overcome. There's other smaller things, I would say cultural things, like you have to get clearance on certain stuff. You have to be a U.S. citizen on certain things. And then if you're doing defense and you have a very international company, which is almost always the case in the Bay Area, where a majority of your employees are immigrants, you have to have that conversation of, what does it mean to work on American defense versus, let's say, so another country.
Germany or something.
Yeah, Germany or something like that. Even though for allies, it is easier to sell. It's just the markets are not very big.
Yeah. Well, you now have fairly large offices outside the U.S. as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a big business outside the U.S. It is not easy for foreign citizens who used to come here as students. I came here as a student, became a U.S. citizen. It's not easy to do that anymore. Are you hiring people from here who then saying, hey, look, I'll be fine. I'll go work at your Japan office or your European office. Is that really a thing or not quite yet?
It's not quite yet, but that would be an option. I mean, we have local entities in Germany and Sweden and UK and Japan and Korea, local corporations. We pay local taxes and receive revenues from our customers in local currency. So they are very, very local, but it hasn't been a real issue. I think it's like, the news is like, it's almost like imagine if a restaurant had a full menu and the news is only about one fry. And so it is representative of what the restaurant does, but it's also one French fry.
Okay.
And so there's some, so some things are exaggerated and some things are, your own echo chambers are big deals.
Yeah,
and
we live in an echo chamber.
Absolutely,
really.
yeah.
So that one fry, there's one fry that I do want to talk about, and that's China.
Yeah, that's a big fry.
That's a big fry.
That's a whole part of the menu.
It almost feels like in the deep tech world, forget about everything else. In the deep tech world, everywhere you look, there's China's doing a lot in it. China has 100 humanoid companies. China has all these automotive companies. Just high level, what is the state of the art, us versus them?
Yeah, let me give so us versus, state of the art is you look at the Tesla announcement, Chinese companies aren't doing that. Where Elon is making the bold, maybe crazy. There's a gray line between courage.
Thin line.
Yeah, thin line between courage and insanity. Killing the Model S and X and going into humanoids aggressively. There's Chinese companies are generally copying still companies like Tesla and Waymo. Generally, I don't overread into these terms, but let me talk about So in terms of just the compare contrast, it's also kind of weird because it's a different country with a different system, with a different population, with different needs, with different GDP per capita. But I think clearly Chinese companies can build anything American companies can, and vice versa. So I don't think that gap is anything significant or worth talking about. And that wasn't the case 10 years ago, certainly not the case 20 years ago. But I think the more interesting thing to discuss about China is the fact that we look at a company like Huawei or we look at a company like Xiaomi and we think, oh, they're like Google and Cisco and they're like companies we know here, right? They're just like that. They're not. A company like Huawei, a quarter of the employees are Chinese, party members, Communist Party members. 200,000 employees, 50,000 are members of the party. All promotions, all major decisions are approved by the party. Huawei says openly, we don't care about profits. We care about growing our presence globally. That's not a company. That's like imagine if you had a Bay Area company called MAGA, half of the employees are Republicans, and they said, we don't care about profits. We just want to proliferate our technology. You wouldn't. That's not really a technology company then. And so we tend to project, as all humans do, our value system on the Chinese, which is the way we think about Google is, no. I can go on Google's campus as a Google employee and say, Google sucks and the administration sucks. I'll get some flack from coworkers, but I'm not disappearing. And that is a very different reality. And what that means at a leadership level, as if you work at a Xiaomi, you work at a Huawei, by the way, as soon as you get to a certain level, I think it's $1 billion, you have to join the party. You can't just be a senior executive in China you have to be a member of the party. Those things are very different. I'm not making a moral judgment that our way is better than theirs, though I generally think it is. I believe in democratic institutions and capitalism, but it's not apples to apples. And I think these comparisons are always super weird to say are they further ahead than us? They're just playing a different game. And I think the mistake that we also make those, and we treat those companies like our companies. So actually, Huawei coming to the US is not like Google or Apple going to China. It's not, because that's an extension of the state. Google and Apple are private companies that do whatever they want, irrespective of what the US government wants, truly and fundamentally. And it's so true and fundamental that we don't even question it. Like, the administration can some degree influence companies, but they can't come in and say, fire that person, this person's gonna get promoted, this is a product you're gonna launch, and shut up about that thing. We're not gonna launch that thing. That you could never do that in a private company. My investors can't do that, let alone the administration.
Yeah.
And so I think it's an incorrect, it's a false comparison.
Very, very interesting. Switching gears a little bit, because I realized that the topic also had AI investing in it. From two-person YC companies, sometimes maybe even one-person YC companies, to now companies with thousands of employees, global, you've seen these companies grow, you've seen every kind of investor, you've seen this room filled with angel investors and some of the most well-known VCs. Thinking about what's happening now, these AI companies that are going 0 to 100 in a year and all, do investors matter? Do who you choose as an investor matters?
Absolutely. I can't think of an analogy off the top of my head, but it's kind of like saying, does the neighborhood matter? Even if the whole neighborhood is doing better, like, does the street and the cul-de-sac and the specific property matter? Like, yeah, it matters. Even if your house is a good house, it kind of is relevant where and who you're among, if not for the fundamental reason that advice matters, and it's very difficult to tell good advice from bad advice. And I think, most cases of investors in Silicon Valley, it's this old analogy I used to hear. It's a very crude analogy, so please don't take it. It's like investor feedback is like fine Kobe beef, sliced up and mixed with dog shit. And you have to, like, every spoon, you got to really think hard about am I getting fine beef or am I getting nonsense? It's crude. I gave you the warning. And so So what you ideally want to do is and we've been very fortunate at Applied. I feel some of the best investors in the business. Mark Andreessen, letter A, Hemant, letter B, Bilal, letter C, really, and Elad Gil, letter D, are really the best investors in the business. And Mamoon, letter round after from Kleiner. So these are literally maybe the best investors. The reason I've been so number one, we had the choice. Not every company has a choice. That's positive. But the reason it's been so important for me to find, I would say, really strong investors, it's not for the brand. It's the advice is generally going to be more good from a Mark Andreessen, a Hemant, a you, people who are very technical. I mean, all those people are engineers. All that, I think, other than Mark, everyone graduated from MIT. So Elad, Hemant, you. So it's like these things, they matter on the periphery. So investors do matter. I think the bigger thing that you said, which is more scary, is the companies that go 0 to 100 in 6 months. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? You would naturally think it's great. We got to 100 million in revenue really quickly. Not so fast. The issue is when markets are kind of like, they have this feature to them. If they're very easy to accelerate into, they're very easy to get pushed out of. And the cautionary tale that exists, there's many, but Hopin, if you guys remember in COVID, anytime a company says we're the fastest growing company in the world, that's when you try to sell your position. Because there's something weird about that market that allows them to consume so much so fast. Like, there are no incumbents, there's no go-to-market issue. There's like something they have to actually get around something. Otherwise, there's 3 others who are going to come right behind them, and they're going to lower the price. Yeah. And maybe when you have a fast absorbent market, that means the switching cost from the user or the business is going to be very low. So they can just consume a lot. Well, guess what? Then they can stop consuming and go to the other company and consume a lot. So these things that are just generally considered like complex sell cycles are generally considered to be negatives in a company, actually can be the thing that holds you in. Consumer companies are a little different. I think the huge advantage, and I don't say this just because I was at YC and work with Sam and stuff about OpenAI, ChatGPT is like in the brains of billions of people, and that's some lock-in of some sort. Anthropic is a great company, and there's many other great emergent companies, but when you're in an airport in Stockholm, people aren't talking about cloud. That's just a reality. the average person really only knows ChatGPT. So there's some value in
Just
that.
like Google it, you know?
Yeah, it's like that, exactly. But like getting to that, I don't know if you can plan that. I mean, but generally speaking, I kind of pull back when I see growth that fast and that quick. It's like, okay, what is the,
Interesting.
what's going to happen here? Like, and then but the Hopin story to finish that is, went up and went down. Ultimately, company was worth, in a year and a half was worth $7.5 billion, and then ultimately sold for 15 million, and million with an M. Yeah.
Wow. Applied is now large enough that it has global impact, like really impact on almost all OEMs around the world, but also small enough that people can chart their trajectory within. So for people at various stages of their careers, and there's probably people here in that, few years out of school versus those that have been engineers, what does that actually look like? Like, when somebody joins Applied, like what are they signing up for besides the financial returns?
Yeah. Just a little bit about how we've hired engineers over the years and how that's changed. When the company was very young, we had a heavy bias towards new grad engineers, and with 3 schools we almost exclusively recruited out of, none of them that I went to, Stanford, MIT, and Berkeley. Number one, just obviously high cognitive ability and hard schools to get into, but also very startup-oriented institutions where our message as a young company would really resonate. And we didn't have we had 20 employees. We couldn't go to U of M and Waterloo and all the other, I would say, strong startup-focused schools. And so we did that for a bunch of years. And then as the company grew, we realized actually every one of our divisions was led by an in-house person. And they do tap out, like at a couple hundred or maybe 1,000 people. They've just never experienced that. And you want to bring in, use our design and marketing lead as an example. We used to have in-house folks who ran design and marketing who had kind of grown with us, first designer, first marketer. We ultimately brought in somebody from the outside, and he's really energized the ecosystem and forces me to do things like this. So the same thing happens on engineering. Today, our engineering mix is like a quarter are new grad, where they're or a third are first company. We have the bulk of the company is about 5 years of experience, of software writing experience. And then we have that, let's say, quarter that are very senior engineers, over 10 years of experience. About 2 years ago, a majority of the company was over 10 years of experience. So we kind of flipped all the way to the other side, and we just hired very, very senior engineers. But the issue with folks early in their careers, they only have your pattern and they kind of know the applied intuition way. That's kind of the issue with folks who are really senior, is they actually are corrupted by all these other companies, and they bring baggage of bad managers that they had before, and so you want a kind of a healthy mix. And I think we've struck that today. I think the thing that you noted, or I think is true, is we're in a particularly, I think, interesting time in the company's history between in the Google days, for any early Googlers here, because we're right next to the campus, is Google really was peak Google from 1,000 employees to 10,000 employees. That's when you're large enough to work on basically anything you want to work on, but it's not so big that it's like, it's just...
You just sit attending meetings all day.
Yeah, you attend meetings all day, navel gazing. And more importantly, you can have small companies, by the way. We've had Applied alums who've left Applied and gone to smaller companies than us and say, somehow I do more meetings, it's more bureaucratic. So that's more of a cultural thing. It's not necessarily purely size. But what ends up happening, I think, around the 20, 30,000 is you're just regressing to the mean. It's hard to find that many great people. I think it's easy to find 1,000 good people. More difficult to find 10,000 good people. Really hard to find 100,000 good people. And when you regress to the mean is, the corporate goon, right? Just I saw this thing on Reddit, which is I want one of those jobs where it's a title technical project program manager, and I just send emails and I get a badge and get paid a few $100,000. Nobody really knows what you do. You kind of, shuffle red, yellow, green on Excel sheets. And that's much more common at large organizations, not because those companies are stupid, they're trillion-dollar companies, it's because the work you're doing is touching so many people, you just need a lot of traffic cops. And those cops form and emerge as product, project, program managers, they emerge as middle management, they emerge as senior management. And then that's when you're just in this ecosystem, you're all everybody does is just give status updates, and rather than actually build. And so I think we're in that sweet spot, and I think we'll be for a few more years. Hopefully, we can continue to grow. One day, we'll have the problem of being a really large company with 20,000 employees, but I think we're still far from that.
Awesome. This was great. Thank you so much for joining us and for being very frank.
Yeah.
As always.
Thanks for having me.